Chapter 4. The Gathering Storm. The final evening in Athens was one of somber reflection and tense anticipation. The air was thick with the weight of decisions yet to be made, and the city's usual vibrancy seemed dulled by the shadow of war looming on the horizon. As the sun dipped below the Acropolis, casting long shadows over the city, Artemisia found herself standing on a balcony, looking out over the ancient city she had come to admire, yet distrust in equal measure. The council meeting that afternoon had been more intense than any other they had attended. The news of an imminent attack on Naxos, led by Aristagoras and backed by the Persian Empire, had sent shockwaves through the room. For months, the council had debated and postured about the growing threat of Persia, but now that threat was no longer a distant possibility, it was a reality. The invasion of Naxos would be the first move in a much larger game of conquest, one that could engulf all of Greece if left unchecked. As soon as the news broke, Cleisthenes had risen to his feet, his voice carrying the urgency and gravity of the situation. We cannot stand by and allow Naxos to fall into the hands of Persia. If we do, what message does that send? That Greece is weak, that we are divided. I, for one, will not let that happen. Athens will defend Naxos with or without the support of this council. Themistocles, ever the tactician, had quickly voiced his agreement. This is not just about Naxos. This is about all of Greece. If Aristagoras succeeds, it will only embolden Darius to continue his conquest. We must stand united now, or we will be picked off one by one. But not everyone shared their resolve. When Cleisthenes pressed Periander of Corinth for his support, the tyrant had hesitated, his eyes shifting uneasily around the room, before offering a flimsy excuse about needing to protect Corinth's borders from potential threats closer to home. His reluctance was obvious, and it only served to deepen Artemisia's disdain for the man. She had never trusted Periander, and now she saw him for what he truly was, a coward who would rather save his own skin than defend Greece. Leonidas of Sparta had been more measured in his response, his deep voice cutting through the tension with a calm authority. Sparta will always defend Greece, but we do not rush into battle without careful consideration. We must weigh the risks, the resources, and the timing. Sending our forces to Naxos now may leave us vulnerable elsewhere. This is not a decision to be made lightly. Though Leonidas's words were rational and considered, Artemisia couldn't help but feel a pang of frustration. The Spartans were known for their discipline and strength in battle, but their cautious approach was at odds with the urgency of the moment. Still, she respected Leonidas's perspective more than Periander's, and she found herself wanting to understand the Spartan king's reasoning further. After the council session had adjourned, Artemisia sought out Leonidas. She found him in a quiet corner of the palace, reviewing a map of the Aegean Sea. His tall, imposing figure was softened by the warm glow of the torchlight, but his eyes were as sharp as ever, reflecting the wisdom and experience of a seasoned warrior. "King Leonidas," Artemisia began, her voice steady as she approached him. "May I have a word?" Leonidas looked up from the map, his expression unreadable. "Of course, Artemisia. What troubles you?" She hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I respect your decision to be cautious, but I wonder, do you not see the urgency of the situation? If Naxos falls, what will stop the Persians from advancing further?" Leonidas regarded her thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered her question. "You are right to be concerned, Artemisia, but understand this. War is not just about the battle before you. It is about the battles that will come after. If we commit our forces to Naxos and are weakened by the fight, we may leave our cities vulnerable to other threats. Sparta must be strong, not just for Naxos, but for all of Greece." Artemisia nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "And what of Caria? What would you do if you were in my father's position?" Leonidas's gaze softened slightly, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of empathy in his eyes. "Your father is in a difficult position, caught between loyalty to his people and the demands of a larger alliance. It is not an easy choice, but if he is wise, he will consider what is best for Caria in the long term. Sometimes that means standing with allies, even when the path is uncertain. His words struck a chord with Artemisia, and she felt a newfound respect for the Spartan king. He was a man who understood the complexities of leadership, and though his approach was different from her own, she could see the value in his caution. "Thank you, Leonidas," she said quietly. "I will think on your words." Leonidas nodded, his expression softening further. "You are a warrior at heart, Artemisia, but remember, a true leader must also be a strategist. Do not let your desire to fight blind you to the bigger picture." As they parted ways, Artemisia felt a sense of resolve settle over her. She had much to think about, and the path ahead was far from clear. But she knew that whatever decision her father made, she would be ready to face the challenges that came with it. The following morning, the palace was abuzz with preparations for their departure. Artemisia, Kairos, and Cimon packed their belongings, while King Lygdamis held final discussions with the council. The mood was tense, with everyone keenly aware that the situation in Naxos could explode into a full-scale conflict at any moment. As they boarded the ship that would take them back to Caria, Artemisia couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her. The conversation she had overheard between her father and Cleisthenes the night before still weighed heavily on her mind, and she found herself watching her father closely, searching for any sign of what he might be thinking. But King Lygdamis was a master at keeping his emotions hidden. His face was a mask of calm authority, giving nothing away as he oversaw the final preparations for their journey. Artemisia wanted to ask him what he had decided, whether he would align with Greece or continue to walk the tightrope between two powerful empires. But she knew better than to broach the subject openly. Instead, she found herself in a quiet corner of the ship with Kairos, who was equally troubled by the events of the past few days. They sat together, the wind tugging at their clothes as the ship began to glide away from the Athenian port. "Kairos," Artemisia began, her voice low, "do you think my father will support Athens? Or will he stay loyal to Persia?" Kairos sighed, running a hand through his dark hair as he considered her question. "I don't know, Artemisia. Your father is a careful man. He won't make a decision lightly, especially one that could put Caria at risk. But I think he knows that he can't stay neutral forever. Sooner or later, he'll have to choose." Artemisia nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "And what do you think he should do?" Kairos hesitated before answering, his voice thoughtful. "If it were up to me, I'd say he should side with Greece. Persia may be powerful, but Greece is our home. It's where our future lies. But I also understand the danger in provoking Darius. The Persians don't take kindly to defiance." She sighed, frustrated by the uncertainty of it all. "I just wish I knew what was going through his mind. I hate feeling like we're in the dark, like children being kept out of the important decisions." Kairos placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "We may not have a say in what happens, but we can still prepare ourselves. Whatever your father decides, we need to be ready to face the consequences." Artemisia nodded, though her thoughts were still troubled. The image of her father, standing in that dimly lit chamber with Cleisthenes, replayed in her mind. She could still hear the words of the Athenian leader, urging her father to find a new wife or secure a husband for her. The idea of being used as a political pawn was abhorrent, and she couldn't help but wonder if her father was truly considering it. As the day wore on and the ship sailed further from Athens, Artemisia kept her distance from her father, unsure of how to approach him. She wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but she knew that now was not the time, not with so much at stake. That evening, as the ship rocked gently on the waves, Artemisia found herself alone on the deck, staring out at the dark sea. The vastness of it was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, and she couldn't shake the fear that had taken root in her heart since her mother's death. The sea had claimed her mother, and now, with the prospect of war looming, it threatened to claim her as well. She closed her eyes, trying to push the fear away. But the vision came unbidden, a fierce battle at sea, ships clashing in a storm of fire and blood, and herself drowning in the cold, dark water. The fear gripped her, tightening her chest and making it hard to breathe. Artemisia shook her head, forcing herself to open her eyes and face the reality before her. She was not a child anymore. She was a warrior, a leader in the making. She could not afford to be ruled by fear, especially not now. As she stood there, lost in thought, Cimon approached her. His presence was steady and reassuring, a reminder that she was not alone in this. "Artemisia," he said softly, "you should get some rest. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, and you'll need your strength." She nodded, though sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. "I know, Cimon, but there's so much to think about, so much at stake. I can't help but worry about what's to come." Cimon gave her a small, understanding smile. "Worrying won't change anything. What matters is how you face what's ahead. You're strong, Artemisia, stronger than you know, and whatever happens, you won't face it alone." His words were comforting, and for a moment she allowed herself to lean on his strength. But as she finally turned in for the night, her mind was still racing, filled with thoughts of the choices her father would make, the battles that lay ahead, and the destiny that was slowly but surely unfolding before her. As the ship sailed on through the night, Artemisia lay awake, staring up at the stars, wondering what the future held. And though she did not yet have the answers, one thing was certain. She would not be a passive player in this unfolding drama. She would fight for her future, for her people, and for the right to choose her own path, no matter what dangers lay ahead. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Artemisia made a silent vow to herself. She would confront her father when they returned to Caria, and she would demand the truth. Whatever it was, she was ready to face it.